If you find that lowering the exposure and adding a blue tint doesn't quite satisfy your vision when converting a shot from day to night in post, then this VFX breakdown may be of some help. In this video, I'll show you a few of the steps we've taken to create a solid day for night shot without the cheesy aforementioned side effects. Third Beacon was in charge of 16 visual effects shots in Blue Serif Productions' feature film Something Like Summer. Some of those were fairly tricky day for night shots, a few of which, to no one's fault, showed up only days before our deadline. Needless to say, there were some very difficult time constraints put on the project. Had the time been there, we would have elected a few other ways to go about creating these shots, but that's the way the industry works. Let's go layer by layer here in After Effects. I'll talk a bit about each one, and I'll explain our thought process behind that. Our methods for folder structure and organization will be covered in another video. So this is the final shot. This is what we ended up with. And I'll go ahead and show you the raw footage that we started with. I believe this is from a Red Epic, and we had these exported as DPX sequences. Now we could have went ahead and worked on this in 3D space, but we did find, since the camera movement was so subtle, that working in 2D and taking separate mocha tracks of individual planes worked much faster. So as you can see, not including the raw footage at the very bottom here, there are 46 other layers. A lot of these are just track nulls. Most of those are the white little icons here with the red label. So the first layer here is this pre-comp. This is going to be for the interior walls of this window. Let's go ahead and jump into the pre-comp. We just got a photo here I took of a white wall inside my house, and using some curves and this 4-color gradient, tried to simulate some light fall off along that wall, as well as some blur, more levels, just to really make sure it doesn't look like this ugly yellow. It's a little more dull, just a little darker. Let's jump back into the regular comp here. And that's tracked to a null, of course, for this window. And then applied to the pre-comp, we've got some blur. And that'll just kind of set it against the edges here a little bit nicer, feather it out a bit. We're focusing on the car here, so everything behind the car or really close to the camera is going to be a little soft. We have glow to obviously simulate some light source. And that also just kind of ties it in. The atmospheric glow, for lack of a better word, is kind of gluing this all together. And the last effect up here is noise. And that's to just kind of simulate the sensor noise, the camera noise, and really glue things into the scene. Let's move on to our second layer here. We got some white dust particles against a black background, and we screened these in with a nice feathered oval mask, using some curves, a little bit of blur here, just to make sure it looks like the depth of field's correct. We're pulling down the dark values to really make sure those hit black, and also to minimize the amount of particles that we see. And this is just like a Kleenex or a towel in front of a black screen with some really high contrast lighting. And those are over there just to kind of simulate bugs hanging out by this porch light. It's these little things that really can kind of bring your scene to life. And now we got this rooftop. And this is a large, dark shape. This was done after a lot of other dark shapes, so this is kind of something that maybe we just last minute decided could be a little darker that was added in. This is obviously tracked to a null as well. We got a pre-comp here. I'm going to solo that. And these are just the really, really sharp fall off of these lights here. And those are just shape layers in a pre-comp with some blur, some curves. And then underneath that, let me zoom in here, is this much sharper, much brighter, tinier light. And that is the actual bulb of that light. And those are obviously tracked to the garage panel here and the front porch. On the 7th layer here is where things get crazy. This is called footage light fall off, and this is a duplicate of the original untouched footage, but as you can see, there are a decent amount of masks here. Each one of these masks were tracked individually. Each one of them have their own path, movement, feathering. I came in here and I was essentially painting with light. This is probably also going to be hard to see on YouTube, but this is the actual fall off of these porch lights here. So if I turn this layer off, looks like basically nobody's home aside from that room. But what really gives it that realism is the fall off. And you have to kind of paint that back in and understand how light affects certain areas, certain textures, ambient occlusion, things kind of like that. This next layer here is night curves. So if I turn that off, you could see what that's doing. Doing a lot. And that's just some simple curves here. Pretty extreme though. Pulling the bright whites all the way down to here. Really steady ramp up. But as you can see, that darkness obviously holds a lot of that together. We have big car shadow. And this is just one of many shapes that we have come in here and traced along different objects. And we have tracked to different nulls. And essentially, it's just a black shape that's been animated. Let me turn the mask back on. To match everything, you can see the mask path has been animated and tracked in Mocha to kind of match this car here, this right side of this car. A lot of this is creating big, dark shapes, tracking them to different faces, and blending them in as best as we can. Now, this is interesting. These bush chunks here are photos of some bushes and shrubbery we had. And these are in here, tracked in Mocha again, because without them, this bush just seems a little too bright, and this is a super subtle thing, but we went through a lot to cover that up and make it look as real as possible. And these are all, again, the same thing. This one is very large. This is just a big dark shape, probably just black. Different opacities. And all of these masks are tracked in Mocha, brought into After Effects, because without them, it's starting to look a little weird, a little more Twilight. One of the harder things about doing a day for night is when things are shiny or there's a lot of specular reflections. So this windshield just wasn't cutting it, just doesn't look right. So I went in and using these these pale gray royal blue solids with a darken blend mode, I was able to just kind of cut out whatever was brighter than this layer. And that's the same thing with this car body here. Another complex set of masks, just done in Mocha, brought in here. This is a red solid. We use the eyedropper to take some color data from the hood of this car here in the shade. And this is just used to kind of cancel out all of these pesky reflections. This is before, and this is after. This is also blend mode darken, so you could see how it just cuts away those reflections. We have a few layers for these tires, another for the front of the house. Here you can see is another grouping of nulls for tracking. You could see these really bright patches through the trees, and at the end here, the sky. And so to kind of combat that, what we did was we took another duplicate of that footage, and we use extract to take out the brightest parts. We made a track matte out of that footage and allow this medium gray royal blue solid to peer through on the brightest parts. So if we get rid of that, you can see that it looks like it's cloudy out or twilight or there's a storm, which could be useful. But because this is supposed to be night, we replace this with very, very dark blue. And the colorist can come in here later, really squish this down more, solidify that effect. So layers 42 to 45 are all the interior of the car. We got a track matte made here, and that is acting as a matte for this. This is a Photoshop file, and this is a really quick, really gruesome matte painting I made just to kind of clean plate what would end up behind the car, essentially what's inside the windshield here. And that's all lined up so that when the windshield is made a little more transparent, we can see what's behind it. And it's not just black, not just a solid color. And then we also added back in the car seats. That's just two black little oblong shapes in here. They might be hand tracked back in terms of movement, just to add some depth and make it look like you're actually looking through the car. Let's go through here and take a look at some of the large areas that we kind of painted dark here. This is the upper roof here. We've got the bush and the car. The front of the house here in between the trees. Let's just get rid of all these at once to see what this looks like. You could see there's a shadow here caused by the sun. And now this roofing specifically is carved out to kind of fit in with that, the darkness of the shadow that's already there. It's also working its way around the tree. That probably would have been better as two separate masks, but whoever did that did a fine job. Let's enable all these. Got these tires here. These were extremely bright. You could see we toned those down. Probably just simple circular masks tracked down to the tire. The front of the house, again tracked in. A little weird the way it kind of bends and moves, but if it gets the job done, that's all that's necessary, that the client's happy and the shot works. Then we've got another black solid up here kind of tracked in. Big oval just to cut down on the sky a little bit more. 90% of what was done here was creating large dark shapes, tracking them to surfaces, blurring them, feathering them. What would have made this a lot cleaner and easier of a process would be if this original shot was taken on a more overcast day. You can see we got some hard shadows from the roof here, some nasty reflections on the actual car itself, the windshield, the top, the sides. So if this was more overcast, that's more reminiscent of moonlight, and you can cover that up a little more easily, and a lot of this might not have been necessary, but unfortunately this is the only day they had. This is the shot we needed to work with. Once a job like this is complete, we like to go back and discuss workflow and creative details to see maybe how we can improve on the next one. On this shot in particular, we figured that this window maybe could be a little more interesting. We could add something to the wall, add a little bit more fall off to the lighting just to make it look a little bit more realistic. And the other thing we noticed was this mirror sticks out just a little bit, as well as the curb here. It does look like there's a street light nearby, which kind of helps sell this. But we maybe would have went in and spent a little more time detailing this up if it was possible. As we continue to stay in touch with this client, if they ever do want an updated version of this shot, we'd be more than happy to give that to them. Overall, the client was happy and the effect is convincing. And like I said earlier, those are the main things. Like and share this video with your fellow filmmakers. Comment, reach out, let us know your thoughts. Did this help you? What are some tricks you use that maybe we haven't? What would you like to see from us? Subscribe to our channel for more tutorials and breakdowns. I'm Kyle Delso at Third Beacon, and I hope you found this information valuable.